Mara Zeller was halfway through a glass of wine, and the worst idea she'd ever had when she asked the tall, broad-shouldered single dad from her daughter's school to be her date to her ex's wedding.
Wait. You want me to pretend to be your boyfriend? At your ex's wedding?
Xander Zane blinked at her, one hand still holding his son's lunchbox, the other resting on the hood of his Jeep.
Mara winced. You don't have to pretend to be my boyfriend. Just look like a guy who could break my ex's ego in half.
Xander looked down at himself. He wore a plain black t-shirt that pulled tight around his biceps, jeans, and a pair of aviators tucked into the collar. He raised an eyebrow.
I'm a mechanic, Mara. Not a movie star. You're also 6 foot whatever, built like a Greek god, and every mom at school stares at you like you're the last man on earth,
she said, arms crossed.
Please. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate.
Xander hesitated, glancing over at the playground where his 5-year-old son, Elijah, was chasing her daughter, Ella.
What do I get out of this? I'll babysit Elijah for free for the rest of the month, she offered. And I'll owe you. Big time.
He stared at her, unreadable, then finally let out a low chuckle.
Fine. But I'm not wearing a tie,
she exhaled.
Deal?
They shook on it, and Mara tried to ignore the little jolt that ran up her arm. The wedding was in 4 days. Her ex-fiancé, Daniel, had emailed her the invitation with a smirking note that said,
Hope you can come. It'll be weird without you there.
And just like that, every ounce of pride she'd built since he left her for his assistant vanished. Mara hadn't planned on going. But then she saw the photos of Daniel and his new bride-to-be all over Instagram with captions like, Power Couple, and
Meant to be.
And something inside her snapped. She couldn't show up alone. Not when Daniel had made her feel like she wasn't enough. Not when he'd made her question whether anyone would ever want her again. For days later, she stood in front of the mirror in a deep blue satin gown that hugged her curves, her dark hair swept up, her heels high. She looked good. No, she looked incredible. And when she stepped outside and saw the matte black Tesla glide to a stop at the curb, her jaw dropped. Xander stepped out of the driver's seat in a black suit, no tie, like he said, but the jacket fit him so perfectly it didn't matter. His hair was combed back, his jaw freshly shaven, and his eyes, those sharp, steel-gray eyes, locked on hers.
You clean up,
she started, then swallowed.
Wow.
He looked her up and down, his gaze lingering just a second too long.
You're gonna make Daniel cry.
She laughed, nerves fluttering in her chest.
That's the goal.
The ride to the venue was quiet at first, but not awkward. Elijah was with a sitter, and Xander had opened the passenger door for her like a gentleman. She noticed the car smelled like warm leather and sandalwood. Expensive. Not what she expected from a mechanic.
This is your car?
She asked, raising an eyebrow. He nodded.
What of them?
She blinked.
What of them?
He didn't elaborate. The wedding was held at the Bellagio Hotel in a private ballroom drenched in white roses and gold chandeliers. Mara's heels clicked against the marble floor as they walked in, arm in arm. Heads turned. Xander leaned down and whispered,
Half these people are wondering who the hell you're with.
She smiled, heart pounding.
Good.
Daniel spotted her across the room. His expression faltered, just for a second. And that second was worth every ounce of planning, stress, and fear.
Well, well,
Daniel said when they approached.
Didn't think you'd show.
Mara smiled sweetly.
Wouldn't miss it.
Daniel's fiancée, a blonde with cold blue eyes, barely looked at her. Xander, however, extended a hand and introduced himself.
Xander Zane. Mara's date.
Daniel shook it, trying to hide his surprise.
Nice to meet you. What do you do? I own a few auto shops,
Xander said casually.
And some real estate. Keeps me busy.
Something flickered in Daniel's face. As they moved away, Mara whispered,
"You didn't mention you own businesses."
Xander just shrugged.
"You didn't ask."
Later that night, after dinner and too many glasses of champagne, Mara stepped out onto the balcony to get some air. The city lights glittered below, and the cool breeze hit her skin like a wake-up call. She didn't expect Xander to follow her.
"You okay?"
he asked, standing beside her. She nodded.
"Yeah. Just weird being here. I thought I was over it, but seeing him standing there with her." "You loved him,"
Xander said.
"That doesn't just disappear."
She turned to him.
"I feel stupid for still caring." "You're not stupid. You're human."
She looked up at him, and for the first time, really saw him. Not just the guy who fixed cars and raised a son, but a man who didn't flinch at her mess, who stood beside her, not because he had to, but because he chose to.
"Why'd you say yes?"
she asked.
"You didn't have to."
He looked at her for a long beat.
"Because I know what it's like to feel like you're not enough."
Her breath caught. He stepped closer.
"And because I wanted to."
The music inside shifted to a slow, romantic beat. Without asking, Xander reached for her hand and pulled her closer. She let him. They danced under the stars, her head resting lightly on his shoulder, his hand warm on her back.
"You're full of surprises, Zane. You have no idea,"
he murmured. And just like that, Mara's plan to show her ex she'd moved on turned into something she never expected, something real. Something that made her heart race in a way Daniel never had. But what she would find out next would leave her absolutely speechless. Mara didn't sleep that night. Not really. She kept replaying the way Xander had held her, steady and warm, while the lights of Las Vegas blinked beneath them. The way his voice had dropped when he said he wanted to be there. The way her heart had stuttered, completely off rhythm. It was never supposed to feel like that. She'd asked him to play a part. That's all. But when he looked at her like that with quiet intensity that settled deep in her chest, she forgot every line in the script. The next morning, she woke to a knock at her door. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened it in pajama pants and a messy bun, only to find a courier holding a long white box and a sleek envelope.
"Delivery for Mara Zeller,"
he said. She signed for it, confused, and brought it to the kitchen. Inside the box was an arrangement of rare indigo orchids, so vivid they looked unreal. The envelope was thick, her name written in bold, masculine handwriting. Inside was a single card. "You looked like a storm last night. I couldn't look away. X." Mara's breath caught. She stared at the words, then read them again. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the card down. She wasn't used to this being seen, not for what she could give or how well she held someone else together, but for who she was when the mask slipped. She didn't know how to respond, so she didn't. Not right away. Later that afternoon, when she picked up Ella from school, Elijah came running out too, backpack bouncing against his back. Xander followed, wearing grease-stained jeans and a navy Henley rolled up to his elbows. He spotted her instantly.
"Hey,"
he said, wiping his hands on a rag.
"You get the flowers?" "I did,"
she said, trying not to sound breathless.
"They were something else. I figured you've had enough roses for one lifetime."
She laughed, surprised.
"You're not wrong."
He shifted his weight, eyes scanning hers like he was waiting for something.
"You busy tonight?"
She hesitated.
"I promised Ella we'd make chocolate pancakes and watch a movie. Bring her over. Elijah's been trying to convince me pancakes are a dinner food." "They are,"
she said immediately, then blinked.
"We could come by. If you're sure." "I'm sure."
That evening, Mara and Ella stepped into Xander's house for the first time. It wasn't what she expected. The exterior was modest, tucked in a quiet corner of Summerlin. But inside vaulted ceilings, minimalist furniture, and art on the walls that looked like it belonged in a gallery. A grand piano sat untouched in the corner. The whole space smelled like cedarwood and something faintly smoky. Ella and Elijah ran straight to the living room, where a stack of board games waited. Mara raised an eyebrow.
This is not what I pictured.
Xander opened the fridge.
What did you picture? Motor oil. Maybe an engine on the dining table.
He smiled, small, but real.
I keep the chaos at the shop. Homes for peace. You painted that?
She asked, nodding toward a large canvas full of violent, sweeping color. He followed her gaze.
Yeah. Used to do it more.
Haven't had the time lately. Didn't know you were an artist. There's a lot you don't know.
She turned to him.
So tell me.
But he didn't answer. Not then. Instead, they made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, played charades, and let the kids stay up too late. When Ella finally fell asleep on the couch beside Elijah, Xander carried both kids to the guest room and tucked them in with a gentleness that made Mara's chest ache. She found him on the back patio afterward, sitting with a glass of whiskey, staring up at the stars.
I haven't seen a sky this clear in years,
she said, stepping out beside him.
You don't look up enough when you're trying to survive.
She sat down slowly.
You always talk like that?
He glanced at her.
Like what? Like you've lived 100 lives.
He didn't answer right away. Then,
I used to have a different life.
She waited. He didn't elaborate.
Why did you really say yes?
She asked. Xander took a slow sip from his glass.
I told you.
No.
You told me what I needed to hear. But I'm not that fragile. You can tell me the truth.
He leaned forward, elbows on his knees.
Because I wanted to see you remember what it feels like to be wanted. That's not your responsibility. Didn't say it was. I just wanted to be the one to do it.
She stared at him, completely still. Then,
you ever think maybe you want too much from someone like me?
He looked over.
Someone like you. Divorced. Single mom. A little too loud when I'm nervous. I cried during commercials.
He tilted his head.
You think perfection's interesting? Most men do. Then I'm not most men.
They sat in silence, the air thick with something neither of them was ready to name.
I should go,
she said finally, standing. He walked her to the car, the porch light casting shadows across his face. As she opened the door, she paused.
That wasn't just for show, was it? At the wedding.
His eyes didn't flinch.
Not for a second.
She nodded, unable to speak. Then she got in and drove away, heart pounding. The next morning, she found an article in her inbox. She wasn't sure how it got there, but the title made her blood run cold. Luxury automotive tycoon Xander Zane acquires stake in international tech firm. She clicked it, and there he was, Xander, in a tailored suit, stepping out of a jet. The article called him a billionaire, mentioned private holdings, offshore investments, a legacy company. Everything about him had been an act, and yet it hadn't. Her hands trembled as she closed the laptop. He wasn't just a single dad with a soft smile and strong hands. He was one of the richest men in Nevada. And he'd never told her. Not once. Mara didn't call. She didn't show up at pickup. She asked her neighbor to grab Ella from school for the next 2 days and sent a polite thank you text when he offered to drop off the homework folder.
Whatever this thing was with Xander, this blur of kisses and secrets and champagne and lies, she needed to sever it before it unraveled everything. And still, she couldn't stop thinking about the look in his eyes when he'd said, not for a second. She should have known. Should have seen it in the way he carried himself, in the quiet certainty of his gaze. It wasn't just confidence. It was power that didn't need to announce itself. She'd asked a man she barely knew to pretend he was more. And he hadn't just played the part, he'd rewritten the script. But what scared her most was that none of it had felt like acting. 3 days later, there was a knock at her door. It was late, nearly 9, and Ella was already asleep in her room. Mara opened it slowly, heart thudding. Xander stood on the porch, hands in the pockets of a black wool coat, his jaw tight.
"You found out,"
he said simply. She didn't invite him in.
"Was I supposed to find out through a headline?" "No,"
he said.
"You were supposed to hear it from me. But I waited too long." "You think?"
He took a step closer.
"I didn't lie to you, Mara. I just didn't tell you everything. That's not how trust works." "I know."
She crossed her arms.
"So what are you, exactly? Some kind of mogul playing handyman for fun?" "I started with one garage,"
he said.
"Built it from the ground up. Added another. Started investing. Real estate, tech, a few other things. It took off faster than I expected. But I never walked away from the first business."
She blinked.
"You still fix cars?" "I still work with my teams. I do the hiring. I check every expansion myself. I just don't advertise the rest." "And the Tesla? The house? The art? What were those props?"
He met her eyes.
"That's my real life. I just don't lead with it."
Mara stared at him, searching for the man who'd danced with her under the stars.
"Why not?" "Because people don't look at me the same once they know."
She didn't answer, just stepped back and closed the door slowly without another word. The next morning, she found a small envelope tucked under her windshield wiper. No name. No card. Just a folded note. "If I told you everything, you would have looked at me like everyone else does. I couldn't stand that." She crumpled it, tossed it into the glove compartment, and tried to pretend her hands weren't shaking. That evening, she sat on the couch, Ella curled beside her watching a cartoon, when her daughter said,
"Elijah's dad asked if we were coming back."
Mara blinked.
"When?" "Today. At school. He gave me this."
Ella held out a tiny folded paper drawn in crayon. It was a picture of a pancake stack with a smiley face on top. Her heart twisted. She didn't go to him. Not that night, not the next. But on the third morning, she dropped Ella off and waited by the curb long after the other parents had gone. Xander's Jeep pulled in just before the bell. He stepped out with Elijah, his face unreadable when he saw her. Mara walked toward him, arms wrapped tight around herself, then stopped a few paces away.
"You didn't lie,"
she said. He didn't move.
"No. But you hid." "I did."
She glanced down at the pavement, then back at him.
"You looked me in the eye and made me feel like I wasn't disposable. Like I mattered. And the whole time, you had a life I couldn't even imagine. I didn't want you to see that part first." "Why not?" "Because I've had women chase the title, the bank balance, the jet,"
he said.
"But you looked at me like I was a person before anything else. And now, I'm still the same man who makes dinosaur pancakes and can't fold a fitted sheet,"
he said.
"And I still want to be the guy who shows up when you're too tired to pretend you're fine."
Mara exhaled, every muscle in her body taut.
"I don't want a fantasy, Xander. I want something that doesn't evaporate when the money's gone or the headlines fade."
He stepped closer, voice low.
"Neither do I. And I have a kid,"
she said.
"I can't afford games. I have one too,"
he said.
"So let's stop playing."
The bell rang, cutting through the air like a warning. Mara didn't move. Xander's voice dropped.
"Come by tonight. No pressure. No expectations. Just us."
She hesitated. He added,
Elijah says the pancake's smiley face misses his best friend.
Mara looked up, something soft breaking through her walls.
Tell him the pancake queen might stop by.
That night, she stood outside his house again, but this time, she wasn't nervous. She was curious. She rang the bell. The door opened almost immediately. Xander gave her a half smile.
You came. I wanted to see if you could cook something that isn't breakfast-shaped.
He stepped aside, and she walked in. This time, the lights were lower, the table already set with candles and real plates. A slow jazz record played from an old speaker. The kids were upstairs, already tucked in by the sitter, who waved goodbye as she passed Mara in the hallway. Xander brought out 2 plates of seared scallops and wild rice, surprising her again.
I thought you were a mechanic,
she teased.
I'm a man of many skills.
They ate, talked, laughed more than they expected. And when the plates were cleared, and he poured her a second glass of wine, she asked the question that had been sitting in her chest for days.
What are you looking for, Xander? Really?
He set the glass down, his hand brushing hers.
I want someone who sees the mess and stays. Someone who doesn't flinch when things get hard.
She stared at him.
That's a tall order.
He leaned in.
So is yours. And yet, we're still here.
His voice dropped.
Maybe that means something.
Mara's throat tightened.
I'm scared. I know. But I want to see where this goes.
He didn't ask for more. He simply reached for her hand and held it, gently, like something precious. Outside the window, the city lights shimmered. And for the first time in a long while, Mara didn't feel like she was pretending to be strong. She felt seen. But what she didn't know, the biggest twist of all, was still coming. Mara stood in front of the mirror, hand shaking only slightly, as she fastened the delicate gold clasp behind her neck. She wore a deep burgundy gown that dipped low in the back, the kind of dress she'd once convinced herself she didn't deserve to wear. But tonight wasn't about playing pretend. It was about showing up for herself. Xander had invited her to a benefit gala his company hosted annually, an event that, up until 3 days ago, she hadn't even known existed. It was held at the Revel Grand, a historic hotel with sweeping staircases and velvet-draped balconies, the kind of place where the lighting made everything shimmer faintly golden. She'd said yes without hesitation. Ella was with Xander's housekeeper for the night, a woman named Larissa, who had raised Xander after his mother passed when he was 16. Mara hadn't known that until he mentioned it in passing, as if it wasn't something extraordinary. But everything about him was layered like that silent foundations beneath calm waters. When she stepped out of the car, the valet offered his hand and whispered,
"They're all watching him tonight."
Then he nodded toward the grand entrance. Inside, chandeliers flickered above a sea of black suits and floor-length gowns. Waiters glided past with silver trays, and somewhere, a live orchestra played something low and romantic. Xander stood near the center of the room, speaking with a man in a white dinner jacket. But the moment he saw her, the conversation ended. His gaze didn't waver as he crossed the floor to meet her, and when he reached her, he didn't say a word. He simply offered his arm. She took it. It wasn't a night for explanations. It was a night for clarity. He led her to a private balcony that overlooked the city. There were no photographers, no guests, no distractions, just the two of them, and the sound of distant music.
"I should have told you everything from the beginning,"
he said, his voice quieter than usual.
"But I like being your equal. I like that you didn't expect anything from me." "You think I expect something now?"
she asked.
"I think you deserve everything,"
he said.
"And I'm still trying to be a man who's worthy of giving it."
She turned to him.
"I don't need your money, Xander. I know. But I want to give you more than that."
He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. She hesitated before taking it. It was a deed. one with her name on it. A small commercial property vacant, but zoned and ready.
"I've seen your sketches," he said. "Your designs for a children's boutique. You left them on my kitchen counter last week."
"You?"
"I didn't read them all. Just enough to know you stopped dreaming because you didn't think anyone would bet on you."
"So I'm betting on you."
Her throat tightened.
"I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything,"
he said.
"But I hope you'll let me be part of the life you're building. Not because I can hand you things, but because I want to stand next to you while you build them."
She folded the paper slowly, hands trembling.
"No one's ever done something like this for me. I didn't do it for you,"
he said.
"I did it with you in mind. That's different."
She leaned in, forehead resting against his chest.
"I'm scared of this." "So am I. But I want it anyway."
He held her, then not gently, not cautiously, but with the kind of certainty that said he'd already made space for her in his life. Later that night, as the gala continued and they returned to the ballroom, Mara noticed something different in the way people looked at her. They still looked at Xander with curiosity, with deference. But now, they looked at her with something else, respect. Xander never let go of her hand. Not once. As they danced, he said,
"You're not the woman I met in the school parking lot."
"No," she admitted.
"That woman was afraid of taking up space. And now? Now I know I don't have to shrink to be safe."
He smiled, quiet, sure.
"Good. Because I don't want you small. I want you brighter, louder, exactly as you are."
Outside, the sky had turned the color of ink, and the city glowed below them. When they returned to his house, Ella and Elijah were asleep in a pillow fort in the living room, surrounded by empty popcorn bowls and picture books. Larissa greeted them with a knowing look before slipping out the door. Mara knelt to adjust Ella's blanket, brushing hair from her daughter's forehead.
"You okay?"
Xander asked from behind her. She stood slowly.
"I think I'm more than okay."
He reached for her hand.
"Come with me."
He led her upstairs to the rooftop terrace, something she hadn't even known the house had. Candles flickered across a long wooden table, and a telescope pointed toward the stars.
"I used to come up here when I couldn't sleep,"
he said.
"Thought maybe you'd like it."
She looked up, the sky vast above them.
"It's beautiful." "You are?"
he said, without hesitation. She turned to him, heart full.
"You know, when I asked you to be my date, I thought I was being clever. I thought I was getting what I needed for one night. And now? Now I know I got what I needed for the rest of my life."
He stepped forward, cupping her face in both hands.
"Then let me be clear, Mara Zeller,"
he said.
"I love you. I love your fire, your fear, your strength. I love the way you love your daughter. I love every part of you."
She laughed through the tears that slipped down her cheeks.
"You waited until I was wearing 5-inch heels to tell me that. I figured you'd be too stunned to run."
She kissed him then, not out of gratitude or relief, but because it felt like coming home. Afterward, they sat wrapped in a blanket, the telescope forgotten. "I want to build something with you,"
she said softly.
"Not just a boutique. A life. We already started," he said. "You just didn't know it yet."
And beneath the stars, with the city humming far below and their children sleeping just beyond the glass, Mara realized something. She hadn't just found love. She'd found a partner who saw every scar and stayed anyway. And that kind of love? It changed everything. The soft rustle of fabric and the hum of quiet conversation filled the boutique as Mara stood near the fitting mirrors, her hands adjusting the bow on Ella's dress. The grand opening was only a week away, and she had insisted on a full test run, a dress-up day for the kids, and a small gathering of close friends to make sure every inch of the store felt right. Not perfect. Just hers.
"Does it look okay?"
Ella asked, twisting slightly to see her reflection. Mara crouched down, brushing a stray curl from her daughter's cheek.
You look like you belong in a storybook.
From across the room, Xander leaned against the archway that led to the back office, watching them. He wore a navy wool coat over rolled sleeves and dark trousers, but it wasn't the clothes that caught her breath, it was the way he looked at her. Like she was still the most surprising thing that had ever happened to him. After the kids were occupied with coloring books and juice boxes, he joined her by the front windows, where sunlight streamed through the glass in long, golden lines.
You've rebuilt this for nothing,
he said. She didn't shy away from the praise. Not anymore.
It's been a long time since I felt proud of something.
He looked around at the row of miniature mannequins, the hand-sewn dresses, the soft reading corners she designed herself.
You should be.
Mara turned to him, voice low.
It's not just the store. I feel proud of who I became.
He reached for her hand, his thumb brushing along her knuckles.
That's the part that made me fall in love with you.
She leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder.
You never told me what happened to Elijah's mom.
He paused.
She left when he was 2. Said she didn't want the life we had. I tried to make it work, but she was gone before I even realized she decided. Do you still talk?
He shook his head once.
She signed away parental rights last year. There's no contact. Larissa stepped in when I couldn't do it alone.
Mara exhaled slowly.
That must have been hard. It was,
he said.
But I wouldn't change a thing. He made me grow up. Made me fight for something real.
She smiled softly.
I know the feeling.
They stood like that for a while, the kind of silence that felt earned. Then Mara pulled a folded sheet of paper from the counter and handed it to him.
What's this?
He asked.
Guest list for the opening. I thought you might want to add anyone.
He unfolded it slowly, scanning the names, then paused.
You put Daniel on here. I did,
she said.
Not because I want him there,
but because I'm done pretending he took something from me.
Xander's jaw ticked slightly, but his voice was even.
You're sure?
She nodded.
I want him to see what I built without him. What I became after he let me go.
He folded the paper again and slid it into his coat.
Then let's make sure it's a night he never forgets.
The week moved fast. Orders were finalized, shelves stocked, signage installed. Ella helped where she could, folding tiny sweaters and arranging hair bows by color. Elijah, ever the mastermind, appointed himself
chief of snacks,
and taste-tested every treat from the caterer. The night of the opening, the boutique glowed with warm light and laughter. String lights crisscrossed the sidewalk outside, drawing in passers-by and guests alike. Mara wore a sleek black jumpsuit with gold detailing and carried herself like a woman who belonged exactly where she stood. When Daniel arrived, she greeted him with polite grace, no bite, no bitterness, and introduced him to Xander without flinching. Daniel's eyes flicked over the boutique, the crowd, the clear admiration people had for her. And for the first time, Mara didn't feel small in his presence. She felt free. Later, while the kids danced to music in the corner and guests sipped champagne, Xander took her hand and led her outside. The air was cool, the stars faint behind the city lights.
I have something for you,
he said, pulling a small black box from his pocket. She blinked.
Xander.
He opened it. A gold ring, delicate and simple, with a single sapphire nestled in its center.
It's not a proposal,
he said quickly.
Not yet. Not until you tell me you're ready. But it's a promise. That I'm not going anywhere. That we're building this together day by day.
Her throat tightened as she reached for the ring.
Then I'll wear it every day until the real one comes.
He slid it onto her finger, and the moment felt more sacred than any vow she'd ever heard. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. But it was real. They stood on the curb outside her dream, arms wrapped around each other, and she whispered, "I love you." He kissed her forehead. "I know." Months passed. The boutique flourished. Orders came in from out of state. Local press featured her in a spotlight piece titled, "From Heartbreak to Handmade." She hired a full-time manager, giving her more time to be present with Ella, with herself, and with the man who had walked into her life without warning and refused to let her fall alone. One evening, as spring softened the desert heat, Xander brought her and the kids to a quiet plot of land just outside the city.
"I bought this a year ago. Wasn't sure why at the time, just knew it felt right,"
he said. The land stretched wide, flat and open, with just enough elevation to see the skyline in the distance.
"I want to build a home here,"
he said.
"With you. With him. A place that's ours."
Mara turned to Ella and Elijah, who were already racing across the dirt, their laughter echoing through the twilight. She looked back at him.
"Then let's start drawing the blueprints."
They moved into the new house the following year. Ella decorated her room with butterflies. Elijah insisted on a treehouse. The boutique expanded to a second location. Xander stepped back from his tech investments to focus more on local development, eventually starting a community program for underprivileged teens interested in trade work. One late summer afternoon, in the backyard of the home they built together, surrounded by friends and family, Mara walked down a flower-lined aisle in a dress she designed herself. Ella held her train. Elijah stood proudly beside Xander as they exchanged vows. Instead of something borrowed, Mara wore a bracelet made from the lace of her old engagement dress, the one she never got to wear all those years ago. It was her way of rewriting the ending. Xander kissed her with both hands on her waist, and the crowd cheered as dusk settled around them. They danced under string lights again, just like that first boutique opening, only this time it wasn't about proving anything. It was about celebrating everything they'd built together, honestly, fully. As the night wound down and the kids fell asleep on a picnic blanket under the stars, Mara sat beside Xander, barefoot and glowing.
"You know what I used to wish for?"
she asked. He glanced at her, brushing hair from her temple.
"What?" "A life that didn't feel like I was surviving it."
He kissed her shoulder.
"And now? Now I'm living it. And I'm not alone."
He pulled her closer, the scent of cedar and something warm wrapping around her.
"We never were."
And under that desert sky, with laughter fading into the wind and the world finally quiet, they let the moment settle. Because this was what happily ever after looked like. And it was better than any fairy tale.